Injuries continue to pile up for our fantasy football team. CeeDee Lamb has been a bust so far this season. You've got Amari Cooper finally having a good game. But what do you do with these star fantasy players on your rosters to make sure that you don't lose out the rest of the season? Here's how you save your fantasy team. Let's start with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, look, he's been underwhelming this season. And I think most people would agree with that. 11 points in week 1 on 10 targets was like, yeah, that's pretty underwhelming for CeeDee. 17 points in week 2 was like, that's better. It's still slightly underwhelming for CeeDee Lamb. And then 6 points in week 3 on 7 targets again. And you're a little bit concerned because when you're looking at the fantasy production for the Dallas Cowboys, he was 3rd among receivers on his team in fantasy production against the Ravens. This is concerning. And I think you spent, either the 101 or the 102 on CeeDee Lamb in your drafts this year. And so those people who have him on your roster as your cornerstone, he's losing you weeks. And we need to stop the bleeding, right? But I do want you to look at 2023 and his production in the first 3 weeks of 2023 as well. Because in week 1, he had 9.7 points against the Giants in week 1 of 2023, and then 19.8 points. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's better. And then 8 points in week 3 against Arizona. Not to mention, he had 6 points in week 5. He only had 12 points in week 4. So through the first 5 weeks of last season, CeeDee Lamb looked to be like the CeeDee Lamb we had seen in the first 2 years of his career. And we didn't see that step up from CeeDee Lamb in the first 3 years of his career, actually. And now, when you look at week 8 and beyond for CeeDee Lamb, 35, 22, 34, 13, 15, 26, 16, 15, 22, 33, 29 points. He dramatically improved his production after the bye week last year. As the season went on, he got better. And so are we concerned about CeeDee Lamb? I would say I am, because you drafted him as a top 2 pick in fantasy football and he's losing you weeks. Are we selling CeeDee Lamb? Absolutely not. The only way you're selling CeeDee Lamb in fantasy football is if you're getting back a Justin Jefferson plus, Amon-Ra St. Brown plus, Jamar Chase plus, Nico Collins plus. Basically, if you're getting out of him what you drafted him for. Maybe some people will do it. Maybe you could get Justin Jefferson plus a lot and you could do that. And you're like, yeah, at that point you're moving to another alpha receiver in the league and you can get more on top. You feel better about that. The problem is nobody's probably making that deal. And so what you have to do with CeeDee Lamb and what the verdict is on him is he's going to be a hold, right? And this is what you pretty much have to do almost always with guys in the first round that you drafted, spent your pick on, and then they end up being mediocre at the beginning of the season. You almost always have to hold. And so with CeeDee Lamb, yeah, I'm not happy that when you're looking at his opportunity, it's significantly lower than it was at the end of last season, where he was getting double-digit targets each of the last 7 weeks there. And he's only had double-digit targets once this year, and it was 10 targets. He barely even got there. I am a little bit concerned. The Cowboys overall have looked a little bit shakier this year, in my opinion, than they did last year. But again, CeeDee has started this way last year. We saw him work through it, and we saw him be dominant last year. And so if we learned anything from that, we learned that we should hold CeeDee Lamb and hope that he reaches the ceiling that we know he's capable of, that he demonstrated last year, and was the reason we drafted him with the top 2 pick. And so CeeDee Lamb as a whole, again, unless you're getting one of those alpha wide receivers plus quite a bit, I'm not selling CeeDee Lamb. I think he's still worth what he was drafted for, and I think he's going to show that for your fantasy team rest of the season, so make sure you're holding him on your fantasy teams.
We had Brandon Aiyuk as an exclusive buy last week, heading into week 3. Expected him to have a big week and be able to be productive with no one else in that offense outside of, Jawan Jennings and Jordan Mason. And Jawan Jennings decides to put up 41 points while Aiyuk takes all the attention away defensively for the Rams and gets, 10 targets still for 5 receptions, only 7 points. He has another 3rd straight disappointing week. He's got through the first 3 weeks of the season this year, he's got 3.8 points, 6 points, and 7 points off of 5, and 10 targets. The volume went up with the injuries piling up for the San Fran 49ers in week 3, and Aiyuk still was not productive. Like, at this point, I think the discussion needs to be, what do we do with Brandon Aiyuk? If there's a believer in your league that thinks Brandon Aiyuk is going to be better rest of season than he has been the first 3 weeks of the year, are you going to capitalize on that opportunity or not? For me, personally, I'm still going to hold on to Brandon Aiyuk. It doesn't mean that I think about him, that I view him the same as I did before this disappointing stretch, right? It doesn't mean that I think his finish is going to be what I believed it could have been heading into 2024 in the preseason. But with Aiyuk, this is a guy that I think has demonstrated now with Debo and CMC and Kittle being out all in the same game in week 3, he's not going to apparently get more production with all those guys being out. In fact, I think he has more upside and more ability to be productive when the rest of those guys are in the lineup because, again, not all the attention is going to be on Brandon Aiyuk. So when Debo comes back, which is going to be soon, when Kittle comes back, which we expect to be next week, I think you're going to see Brandon Aiyuk be able to capitalize on more of this opportunity in honestly more friendly situations. He's got New England next week. He's got Arizona. Then he's got Seattle and Kansas City, which, those are tougher games. But I mean, in weeks 4 and 5, I think he has the upside to be incredibly productive. You just saw Aaron Rodgers completely school New England on Thursday night in week 3. I think San Fran's going to have a good day, and I think Aiyuk is going to be able to reap the benefits. If you own Brandon Aiyuk right now and you're thinking about selling him, I wouldn't do it now. I would wait at least until he has a 20-point game. Like, this is just, to me, this is a situation where I understand what the concerns are, and that is he's not capitalizing on opportunity. Clear opportunity where he should be the dominant wide receiver. Jawan Jennings did it. Why didn't Aiyuk do it, right? So I'm. What do you think about this?
So you're not going as far as to say to buy Brandon Aiyuk anymore?
No,
because I still think I would probably say I would go be sitting offers for Brandon Aiyuk because I think you can get him really cheap now. I think you can get him cheaper. I'm just tempted here to double down and say I think Brandon Aiyuk is going to get better as the season goes on. Obviously, the opportunity was there today and the production wasn't. Against a defense where I would have expected Brandon Aiyuk to be productive, but I think a lot of this is that he hadn't played football. He did not go through training camp, right? He did not play at all in the preseason. Yep. And so I feel like as the season goes on, now here's the tough part. He's got Christian Gonzalez next week, right? So I don't feel like it's going to get much better. So maybe you hold and then buy after next week. It could get even more rough. But,
even with Rodgers working that defense like he did?
Yeah, but Garrett Wilson didn't really work Gonzalez. I mean, Gonzalez played that touchdown, and outside of that, Garrett Wilson didn't really do anything.
That's true.
He was pretty, he wasn't really being targeted because Gonzalez is such a good cornerback. And so, I don't think his price is going to go much further down, but I would consider sending offers for Aiyuk because I do think he projects pretty well rest of the season still, in my opinion. I do think he's hurt a little bit by Debo being out, and I do think he's hurt by Christian McCaffrey being out. But let's talk about a rookie wide receiver now, and let's talk about Rome Odunze. And Rome, in the first couple games, didn't do anything. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, they weren't playing the Colts in the first 2 weeks of the season. And the Colts, let me tell you, they have the worst secondary in the league, probably. They already lost one of their starting cornerbacks in a secondary where they did not do anything this offseason, and it was already really bad. They have one good cornerback in Kenny Moore, and that's it. That's it. They have nobody else. And Kenny Moore wasn't guarding Rome Odunze. And so when you're looking at his production the first 2 weeks, 1 point and then 4 points, and then in week 3, he comes out, he has 11 targets, he catches 6 of those for 112 yards and a touchdown. Now, here's the thing with the Bears. Again, the Bears are not going to play the Colts every week. The Bears are also not going to pass the ball 52 times every week. You're not going to see Caleb do this. And Caleb was, largely inaccurate for a lot of day. He had 360 yards, but he's 33 of 52. He had 2 interceptions. Caleb Williams still looks like that rookie quarterback that we've seen in the first 2 weeks. He didn't really look much better. Against the Colts, again, you expect teams to throw the ball more, and you expect receivers who don't typically produce to produce more. The other big thing here is that Keenan Allen was out, and Keenan Allen, from a target standpoint, from a target percentage standpoint, when Keenan Allen's on the field, has been getting a lot of targets. And so he had 11 targets in the 1 week he played in week 1. And so with Rome, honestly, the offense there looks bad enough and incompetent enough. The system looks quite bad. And Rome Odunze...
Thanks, Shane.
Shane Waldron looks... It's just not good, guys. And this is not a Rome thing, because I will tell you this. Because the thing is, when we say to sell young players, everybody gets offended. People in the comments are saying we're insane, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. I think Rome is a soft sell, and I think I would explore offers for him because I think he's going to gain a ton of value because I think people are thinking this is him turning a corner. But when Keenan Allen comes back, and as the Bears continue to kind of work their way through the season, I don't think the situation for Rome Odunze gets any better than it did today.
No.
And look, Rome is going to get better. I love Rome Odunze, the talent. I think Rome was almost as talented as Neighbors and Harrison. I was big on that train. In Dynasty, I love Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze is, I know he is an elite prospect, an elite wide receiver, and he is going to be amazing with Caleb Williams in years to come. But in terms of this year, I'm just not confident in the offense. I'm not confident in Caleb Williams, and I'm also not confident that Keenan Allen is just going to die. So with that being said, I would shop Rome Odunze specifically for prices like these, because going into this week, he was ranked as like the 62nd best running back or wide receiver rest of the season, but I think he takes a pretty big jump. And so when you're talking about who you can get for Rome Odunze rest of the season, I think George Pickens. I think if you can get George Pickens, I'm okay taking that. I think if you can get JSN, I think I'm okay taking that, because JSN we'll talk about in our buys video. I think if you can go get a Kenneth Walker, a Stephon Diggs, if you can go get a DK Metcalf, If you can go get, I mean, we're getting into DJ Moore. That's probably a little bit far-fetched. T. Higgins even. If you can go get those type of guys, and I'm aiming high here, right? I would shoot high, aim to sell high. If you're going to sell at the prices he was going before last week, just don't sell him. Just hold him. He's got enough upside for you, right? We've seen his upside. But in terms of the situation for Rome, it has nothing to do with Rome, the talent. It's everything to do with, I don't believe in Shane Waldron. I don't believe in the Bears. I don't believe in Caleb Williams. And I don't believe that Keenan Allen's going to die. That it has nothing to do with Rome and everything to do with the situation.
So I punched the numbers. And do you want to know how many points the receiving assets have scored against the Colts defense in the first 3 weeks of the season?
Oh, gosh.
Houston, 45 points.
Okay.
Green Bay,
with
Malik Willis, just under 30 points. The week 3 game against the Chicago Bears, who suck, 56 points. All their receiving assets combined for 56 points.
Again, I love Rome. Do not sell low on Rome Odunze. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you if you can get a crazy good price for Odunze. I think there are players like if you can get wide receiver ones for Rome Odunze, I'm going to do that deal.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Next guy that we're going to talk about here, or guys, is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, because we are now 3 weeks into the season, 3 straight weeks of David Montgomery meeting or exceeding Jahmyr Gibbs' production.
Exceeding in all 3 weeks, technically. He's technically beat him all 3 weeks.
Yes. Yes. Are we freaking out about this? I mean, kind of, yes. But honestly, to me, this is very reminiscent of last year, where we were 3 weeks into the season and Jahmyr Gibbs straight up wasn't being used. And we were like, what is Ben Johnson doing? Like, what is going on here? Why is this happening with Jahmyr Gibbs when they spent a high first round pick on him? And, first 3 weeks of the season last year, he gets 27, 48, and 60% snap share, only gets 7, 9, and 8 points, right? Gibbs, obviously this year, way better, 15, 14, and 16 points. Montgomery, though, gosh, dude, Montgomery's getting receiving work even, which was not the case last season. He's gotten 4 targets in week 2 against Tampa, 3 targets this week against Arizona. He's amounted 15, 15, and 20 points first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, at this rate, again, I said reminiscent of last year because in 2023, Monty had 13, 11, and then he actually didn't have any points against Atlanta in week 3. So Gibbs had some opportunity to produce there and still didn't. Look, they're both getting more usage this year through the first 3 weeks of the year, and it's not changing. The same thing is happening. The split is 50-50. The snap share, honestly, for David Montgomery has gone down, right? 50% snap share in week 1, 35 against Tampa, and really same amount against Arizona. He's getting valuable carries. I mean, they're getting into the red zone and they're giving the ball to David Montgomery because Ben Johnson's a good play caller and he can scheme up Monty and make him look good and they get a touchdown out of it. This is not, look, this dates back to our take on Jahmyr Gibbs before the season started. And that was, there was an argument, a very popular argument, that Jahmyr Gibbs was a ceiling play when you were drafting him in the first round, right? The tail end of the first or the early second.
Floor play.
And and we were saying, no, he's a floor play. He's got a high floor, and honestly, he has a low ceiling. He has a low ceiling because of what Montgomery we expected him to do, and this is exactly what we expected him to do.
And what we said specifically in the video, where we did get a fair amount of pushback, and I say pushback because that's the nice way to put what we got.
Nice way.
Was we said that Saquon Barkley and JT going after Gibbs had higher ceilings than Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yep.
And we were correct about that.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that Jahmyr Gibbs is bad. I'll let you finish. But it's just to say that this was kind of always the plan for the Lions. And it's not a bad plan. It's a good thing to utilize 2 good running backs. And so I think they're doing the right thing here. But I'll let you finish.
Look, I think this is a situation, again, I'm not trying to victory lap. The point is not to victory lap or take on Jahmyr Gibbs 3 weeks into the season. I think the point is to say that this is a legitimate concern that is going to carry on for the rest of the season as long as both of those guys stay healthy. Montgomery has shown in the past, he demonstrated last year that he can struggle with injury and he will get banged up. I'm holding Jahmyr Gibbs if I own Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not going out of my way to go buy Jahmyr Gibbs because if I'm buying, I'm shooting for upside. If I'm buying Amari Cooper in week 2 when he's not producing but getting 8 or 9 targets and getting a bunch of balls downfield, where if he just catches one, we're having a totally different conversation. Lo and behold, he gets 2 touchdowns week 3, scores 25 points. He's not a buy anymore because he can't get them for cheap. Right? Those are the types of guys that you're looking for as buys. Jahmyr Gibbs' usage is going to be what it's going to be for the rest of the season. While Jameson Williams is getting a ton of targets, while Amon-Ra is doing what Amon-Ra does, while Detroit looks like kind of a vulnerable offense and is only putting up 20 points.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's so many mouths to feed in that offense that I think that's why Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a hold. Don't sell him. Don't panic sell or anything like that. Again, very safe. His floor, second to none when you're talking about running backs across the league, right? So that is a positive with Jahmyr Gibbs, but I'm not going any further than that.
I don't think I completely agree with you there. And again, I'm not selling Gibbs. I think this is always what Gibbs is going to be. And when we say that he's a floor play, not a ceiling play, it's not like Jahmyr Gibbs isn't going to have a week of 25, 30 points. He will have weeks where he has multiple touchdowns, and you see that. But I do think that on a more consistent basis, you're going to see him in the 15 to 20 point range, which is still elite. You still feel good about Jahmyr Gibbs if you drafted him. So that's the main point here. But let's talk about Amari Cooper. We told you, got to buy Amari. You got to buy Amari. You got to buy Amari. If you bought Amari, I clap for you. You did a good thing because Amari Cooper, 9 targets in week 1, 8 targets in week 2, and then 12 targets in week 3. The difference was in week 1 from a production standpoint, 2 points, 2.5. Week 2, 2.5 points.
Yep.
Lo and behold, Deshaun Watson sucks. Yeah. But Deshaun Watson's still good enough to get Amari Cooper the ball. You saw this on display on both sides of the ball in this game in particular. Daniel Jones, he sucks. Yeah, but he's good enough to get Malik Neighbors the ball. Deshaun Watson sucks. He's good enough to get Amari Cooper the ball. And I think Amari Cooper at this point, I think you could still probably buy him. He's averaging almost 10 targets a game, just a hair under 10 targets a game, 9.6 targets a game. And in my opinion, I still think he's going to be widely undervalued by a lot of people even after this game, because I think a lot of people don't believe this is sustainable for Amari Cooper. And I think what is the more likely, I think the better explanation for what he's done over the first 3 weeks of the season is weeks 1 and 2 from a targets to production standpoint. That was an outlier. They were outliers, and you had him, and it sucked. But Deshaun is good enough to get him the ball. You're looking at the schedule: Vegas, Washington, Philly, Cincy, Baltimore, and the Chargers. Not that bad of a matchup schedule going up to the bye week for Amari Cooper.
Not at all.
I'll still put him on here as a buy. Obviously, if somebody's like, yeah, hey, look, he's so much more valuable to me after this 1 week, which anybody who knows anything probably shouldn't have valued him any lower. I mean, you knew this was coming for Amari. However, you will have people that be like, yeah, I saw 24 points now, I don't want to sell him. But if you can still target him, I think I would. And looking at who he's being valued next to, Jaden Reed, Xavier Worthy, David Montgomery, Brian Thomas, Jordan Mason, Tony Pollard, J.K. Dobbins, Lad McConkey, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, even going above him, J-Mo, Tank Dell, JSN, Ramondre, Rashad White. I think every single guy I listed that. I absolutely. And again, just looking at the expert consensus rankings rest of the season on Flock, so it's all of our rankings combined. And I think I'm taking all those. I think Amari over all those guys.
Yep.
I mean, don't forget that Amari, even last year, and Joe Flacco was throwing him the ball last year, right? I mean, he's coming off a year where he was the wide receiver 18, and he had 128 targets. And I want to do the math when he is on pace this year for 164 targets. And so, he's not going to get 164 targets, but he's on pace for a lot. He's on pace for even more targets than he had last year playing with Deshaun. And they're also passing the ball a little bit more. So I think Amari, you still kind of shop and see what you can get him for. I think if you can get him for a good price, he's a wide receiver 1 in an offense where he's getting 10 targets a game. Follow the targets. Like I would say this all the time. I blindly follow targets. I will blindly follow the targets to Amari Cooper. I will, because in the weeks where he doesn't have 2 touchdowns and doesn't have 24 points, I don't think you're going to see him have 2.5 points anymore. I think his floor is going to be around 10, 11 points. And I think he's going to have 25-point upside every single week he's on the field. And so for that reason, I'll buy Amari Cooper still.
So Bryce Young may have just been that bad. Like, really, historically, potentially that bad. Like, maybe one of the biggest busts of all time bad. Because Diontae Johnson just dropped 22 with Andy Dalton stepping on the field in a Dave Canales offense that everyone was laughing at. And then they just dropped 36 against Vegas, who just upset Baltimore in week 2. And really not a bad defense, right? I mean, you got Max Crosby there, and you have the guy that they signed from Miami in the offseason. Like, good line, good defense. And Andy Dalton just went in there and oh my gosh. I understand there is an advantage going into a game with a brand new game plan, a brand new quarterback, that, you know, the defense is at a disadvantage. Vegas is at a disadvantage in a matchup like this because they don't really know what's coming. So you're probably going to have a little bit of regression statistically for a lot of these receiving assets. You're not going to see 36 points for Carolina every single week. I totally admit that. You're not probably going to see 14 targets every single week for Diontae Johnson, because now people know that he's actually a threat with a semi-competent quarterback in Andy Dalton. That said, I am almost tempted to buy the hype here and potentially invest in Diontae Johnson. I think you're going to have a lot of people who own Diontae Johnson that see this production that just want to cash out now. Because do I really blame you, first of all, if you're a Diontae Johnson owner and you're feeling that? I don't blame you at all, because this situation is disgusting, right? But 14 targets on a gross offense, that ain't disgusting. I'll take it. I mean, we just saw it in the same offense last year. In Adam Thielen, who's 31, 32 years old and was a mid-wide receiver too at the end of the year, which is crazy. It was a terrible situation, terrible offense. Look, Diontae Johnson with Andy Dalton, I'm totally cool with that. Is he going to get a touchdown, 122 yards, 22 points every single week? No. Will he get 12 to 15? I'm willing to bet that that's very possible, because when you're looking at the splits from a wide receiver perspective on Carolina, past Diontae Johnson's 14 targets, it's Thielen with 5, it's Leggett with 3, it's Mingo with 0 or 4. Diontae is the guy. And we saw this again in the preseason. Like, Dave Canales told everyone, where's Diontae Johnson at? That's what our focus is offensively. I think he tried with Bryce Young, and Bryce Young just couldn't do anything. Now he sees Andy Dalton, he's like, okay, I'm going to get the ball to my best guy. This now makes the Carolina Panthers offense from a fantasy perspective very, very interesting, especially again with Jonathan Brooks coming into the equation. You saw Chuba drop 25. I think Brooks he gets a little bit of a boost from that.
Yeah.
But with Diontae, I'm curious to see what you think about Diontae. Would you be willing to buy Diontae if there are some takers, if they just want to cash out now? Are you buying the hype and what's going on?
I think in every single casual league, every single home league, and even in some leagues where you got people who know what they're talking about, you're gonna have everybody selling Diontae Johnson. I think
I'd take him.
I'm absolutely buying Diontae Johnson.
Yeah.
There's no question.
And we're gonna get a lot of criticism for that, because
we shouldn't.
Like, this is a prime. Everyone's gonna look at this and say prime sell candidate.
Have you paid attention?
Right?
Have you paid attention though to Diontae Johnson for any of the last 4 years?
Exactly.
And the rate at which he draws targets. It is top 10 in the NFL over the last 4 years, how many targets he got. And that was while he's playing for the Steelers. Mind you, the Steelers, who had statue Ben Roethlisberger as their quarterback, who had Kenny Pickett as their quarterback, Mason Rudolph as their quarterback, and he's still getting those targets. This is a Steelers team that won't pass the ball half the time, and he's still getting that amount of targets. Yeah. And you finally get a different quarterback out there, and lo and behold, Diontae Johnson gets 14 targets. He catches 8 of them. Why? Because that's what
Diontae Johnson does.
Andy Dalton's not going to get him 12 receptions on 14 targets.
You've seen Dalton do this for guys like Chris Olave though too, right? Who outproduced expectations as a rookie.
But here's the thing about Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson, the type of targets he's getting, it's number one, sustainable. Number two,
sustainable.
They're not super. It's not like it's not a Rashid Shaheed situation here. You're not throwing it deep to Rashid Shaheed and it's like a 50-50 ball for every play, and he's either going to score 12 points or you're going to score 0 points.
It takes a competent quarterback to be able to make those throws consistently, and that's what Dalton is, and that's clearly what Bryce Young wasn't, because you just saw a switch flip, literally a switch flip overnight.
Look, you can get Diontae Johnson dirt cheap. That's the thing. I think if you can get him, you do it. But there you go. Some advice this week for some of the hotter players in fantasy football that are like, yeah, I think a lot of people are freaking out. A lot of people are going overboard. So make sure you do those things. Just 2 things for us. Make sure you drop a like and make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, we're obviously coming out with fantasy football content all season long, and we're trying to put out the best content for you we possibly can. So we'd appreciate if you did those 2 things. It tells us we're doing something right, and it really supports the channel. So we appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching, and we will see you later.